Hello fellow unicorns, welcome to another video, and today I have another tutorial for you, and that is how to draw wet hair. We're gonna use some examples of short and long hair for both male and female characters, and if you're interested in how to draw the faces themselves, I have linked the tutorials about faces, and of course you can see them being linked to the tutorials about drawing bodies, and I will be linking a tutorial about drawing hair as well, because you will need this knowledge to actually go to this lesson. So let's start and draw some long-haired characters first. As I always mention, you need to have this sort of a halo around your bare head character. This is very important because this halo here is actually the volume of your hair. It's very important not to forget this volume, because this volume is the minimum thickness of your character's hair, unless your character is balding or have extremely short hair. Extremely wet hair can touch up on this line, but it doesn't go under it. And this is in extreme cases of the hair being really wet, but we'll go to that part later. So let's draw out some normal long hair for our characters. Let's, for example, do similar haircuts for both of these characters. Of course, don't forget that all the characters, both male and female, have sideburns. This is very important to remember. And the upper quarter of the faces is the edge of their forehead. This is very important to remember, because you don't go over this line unless you have some sort of a hairdo that has a little bit of hairstyle that goes upward, but just a little bit, but the part of the hair goes down again. So when you're styling the bangs, you shouldn't start them above this line. Same goes for the male characters, so you can combine pointy strands of hair here and there. Some of them are thicker, some of them are a little bit above the hair shape, but remember that a lot of characters don't actually have any hair shapes except for a loose strand or something like that in this area. In this area you should keep a smooth kind of a shape, especially for females, because this is something important for their character. If you're making like an explosive firecracker like looking hair, it's usually reserved for male characters. Also, interesting parts of the hair for anime characters are the sideburns. You can play around with sideburns, make them square, make them long. Both of these hairstyles are very similar and can be implemented on both guys and girls. So it's important to always remember to keep the volume very nice and thick. And when you're doing the long hair, you can just prolong it this way, like it's being blown in the wind. The thicker the hair is, the more space you add up from this initial halo, the better it is for dry hair. So remember this. I'm going to make the lines thicker and highlight the shape of the hair. So we're using this previously mentioned bang shape that's going above and then floating down below. Of course, if you want to have a successful shape for the hair, a lot of hair shapes in anime and manga are always kind of using these pointy little strands. And don't forget to make a very nice big volume above your character's heads. This is something very important. And when you're shading this here, I'm going to show you how to shade the hair as well. I'm going to use this simple gray marker, and we're just going to go through some areas on the bangs that are most likely to be shaded. For dry hair and for wet hair, shading is different. So we will use thick and wide shaded areas for dry hair. Highlights are something completely different. So highlights are used when you have fully colored hair. So we won't be talking about that now. And you should definitely remember that if you have hair that has a lot of volume, then that you just need to use these hidden areas and shade them fully, so that you show that this person is encased in her own hair, that her hair has a lot of volume. And there we go. This is like the basic. Maybe you can even do this to emphasize that her hair is extra voluminous and thick. So let's just fill in this. And this is the basic of the shading for this type of hair. Now let's go to the male hairstyle. These hairstyles are basically the same. So you will have pointy strands, long sideburns that end up in a pointy shape, nothing special. And I wanted to just emphasize that you can use similar hairstyles on both male and female and androgynous anime characters, because these hairstyles are something that's just very specific for manga and useful for many different characters. Let's go and shade this as well. There is a huge difference between shading the wet hair and shading the dry hair, and this is why I'm just demonstrating the areas you should be shading. This is the simplest form of shading. It's called cell shading, when you just use sharp lines to show where the shaded areas are. And the easiest thing about manga is when you learn where the shadows are supposed to go, the same pattern will be used for every other character. To practice this, make sure to, when you're watching your favorite anime show, try to focus and see what kind of shadows their hair or bodies have, and you will soon realize that 99% of the characters in all of your favorite anime actually have the same patterns of shading, like the shadows that are on the same place, shadows underneath the chin, shadows underneath the bangs, and etc. So just keep practicing your observational skills when you're watching your favorite anime. Do some spying, as I would like to say. Let's use these hair shapes and transfer them here, and let's see how the hair acts when it's wet. So the first thing we will do, we will use one of these strands, which are nice and thick, and each strand, when it's wet, it's going to turn into a thin, pointy, sharp strand, maybe even like develop 2 or 3 side strands. And this is what we're going to do for these hairstyles. So let's go and just remember where to put our edge of the forehead and the sideburns, and then we go and transfer the shapes we previously drawn. But this time we're going to make them have side strands. We're going to make them closer to the face, like it's sticking to the face, going over the eyes, going into the eyes, making our character really look uncomfortable. The entire volume of the hair is just sticking, going thinner and sticking to the face. Our halo we previously mentioned is going to get touched upon because the entire hair is just wet and flat and just going to literally stick to the body. So we reduce this entire volume. Our sideburns are going to get a little bit wobbly. I don't know if you guys get this, but when I get my hair wet, it all just starts curling and just sticking to my neck and my face. So this is the same thing that you should be transferring to your manga or anime character. Also, one important thing, each of these strands should contain a droplet of water. You can even use tiny U shapes and put them on your character's body and hair, so that you can get a really realistic looking wet character. And then when we have our shape for the hair, we just define it with some inking tools. If you're interested in tools that I'm using, you can definitely check out the description under the video, and you will find linked in the description all of my tools in the tiniest details. Of course, there is a video in my tutorial section that explains that you do not need fancy tools to draw manga. Fancy tools are tools that actually just help people who professionally work in manga to save up on time. But except for that, fancy tools are not necessary for drawing manga or for beginners. So please remember that. You don't need to empty your or your parents' wallets for fancy tools. Anyways, let's go and shade this baby. So when we shade wet hair, the shadows also change, because we used to have these nice wide shaded areas. Now the wide shaded areas are turning into long, pointy, thin areas, because our hair strands got wet, they got pointier, they got longer, and the same goes for the shadows. The shadows are also getting pointy and longer, just following the strands and just making everything looking extremely uncomfortable for the character. I don't know about you guys, but I hate being caught in the rain. So I guess the characters don't like it either. Maybe some of you guys do like it, I don't know. Leave the comment down below and tell me what you think about getting caught in the rain without an umbrella. Okay, so the same goes. As you can see, this isn't pretty, this isn't looking like she's enjoying it, and that's the point. So let's go to the male character. We're going to do the same. So all of his little strands and all of his bangs are getting divided into like 2 or 3 tiny strands, and they're curving up, they're going downward. As I said, like everything is supposed to be going downward. Same goes for his bangs. So like everything is thinner, everything is sticking to the face, the volume is way less prominent. The hair can like literally go wobbly and just trying to stick to the body. The long sideburns are also just sticking to his collarbone, to his neck, and this is something that's completely normal when you get caught in the rain. And let's define these little strands. They're all pointy, they can divide themselves into like miniature side strands, and sometimes they can cover the character's eyes, sometimes they can get into character's eyes. Now you can definitely like draw them like moping or being dissatisfied by this, and that's completely fine. You literally are creating a scene that has a story with this look. Don't forget the little halo, like don't go under the halo, just go next to the halo of the bear head skin. And of course, don't forget the tiny U-shapes, tiny little U-shapes all across the surface of your character's neck and face. Sometimes you can even use a long line and end that with a U-shape, so that you can show a droplet that has been sliding down your character's face or neck. And don't forget, like when you have wet clothes and stuff, you can definitely use these little U-shapes to draw out the texture of the clothes as well. Speaking of which, at the end of this video I will link on my Patreon a specially made Patreon lesson on wet clothes. It's a bit of a complicated lesson for advanced learners, so if you're interested, make sure to check it out at the end of this video. Okay, let's go to the well, we just did long hair. Let me just upgrade this and add some additional strands. Sometimes they can really go like all over the place and just branch out into tiny strands. So don't be afraid to maximize the amount of wet strands. Oh yeah, and of course let's do the shading for this character. Let's do each of his little strands some long pointy shaded areas. when the hair is wet, the amount of highlights also gets more prominent, and you can add some really long and big white highlights on the character's hair, maybe make them waggly and zigzaggy and just all over the place, because when a surface is wet it has a lot of highlights. It still goes the same, like the rule is the same about the inner side of the hair. Maybe if the hair has like big length, sometimes it will divide itself into like sticky strands, and then you can do them in the back of the character as well, like here. Okay, now let's go to the short hairstyles. So as I previously mentioned, female characters, let's just draw out the halo. Number one rule, don't forget the halo. Halo. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Anyways, don't forget the halo, don't forget the sideburns, and don't forget the forehead. This is the main rule before even touching the paper to draw the hair. So let's go to the short hair creation rules. You can choose a spot on your character's head. You can then do some shapes to strand the hair, like where the strands will be. I'm gonna use a bit of an upbeat character hairstyle, because when this hair goes wet, everything just gonna start flopping down. And this is something that's very important to learn, because this is the rule of wet hair. So let's use this shape for the girl. As I said previously, like when you're creating hairstyles for girls, always try to keep this part mainly smooth. When you're trying to create male characters, then you are allowed to use this area and just do some wacky stuff and do some funny gravity, anti-gravity hair moments. Anyways, let's not forget the halo, let's not forget the sideburns, and let's not forget the forehead. Now let's go and create this character's hairstyle. We're going to use this little dot in the middle of his face. Then we're going to create the general outlook and add up on some sideburns. We're going to add up on some sideburns here as well, because cutesy curvy sideburns are always a good thing with anime characters. Let's have this little horn looking piece. Let's do some really cool bangs and a bigger bang here, and let's do some sideburns. Of course, when you're drawing male characters, if they have seemingly short hair, don't forget this part right here. This is very important part. So this lower hair on the back of his head is something that you shouldn't forget to draw. Okay, let's define the shape of these hairstyles and let's see how they are shaded. So anyways, I'm going to just use her hair strands, shape them, end them in a pointy shape. Don't forget to use a lot of volume for your hairstyle. Let's try some upward facing strands, just to make it like fun and light. This shape of hair can insinuate that our character is very upbeat and friendly and fun. And let's go and start from the same areas, like from the areas in the bangs. Like the generic way of shading the hair is to imagine that all of the shadows are on the lower part of each hair shape. Also, when you have hairstyles like these, you can use this general rule to literally cut the entire hair in half and then just color in completely, like shade in this entire lower area. This is a very simple trick but effective, because our character instantly looks like she came out of an anime. So make sure to remember this when you have hairstyles like these. It's completely fine to shade them, literally cut them in half, then shade the lower area. Okay, so we have this here done. Let's just add up on another strand here and add up on some cute sideburns. And let's go to the male character. The male character has a cutesy little hair shape here. It's technically a short hairstyle, but nothing like something we can see on realistic guys, because everything is just so full of life and just bouncing everywhere and defying gravity with hair strands. So it's more fun than real life hairstyles, but it's still a short hairstyle. And let's see how this shape is supposed to be shaded. So technically, if you use this curve here and then transfer it a couple more times, you'll get the area for shading your character. And you just use this lower area, fill it in, and you have the generic shading pattern. When you literally memorize this pattern, it's so easy, because like 99% of characters with short hair have this pattern in anime. Because usually we like to show that many scenes in manga and anime have this normal lighting where the sun is above their heads, or they have some sort of a light above their heads. There is rarely an occasion where the shadows are being represented in a different way from this one. You can of course add some volume if you use some smaller curves, and yeah, this is it. Anyways, let's go and transfer these hairstyles into wet versions of these hairstyles. So we're going to use, again, don't forget, halo, sideburn, and forehead. Halo, sideburn, forehead. This is very important. Then we go and transfer these strand by strand, just transfer them into a thinner version of themselves, like curved, sticking to the face, getting like another piece of themselves separated but thinner. All of these little upward strands are going to go downward. They're going to just flop. So we have one, we have two, just flopping them downwards, just flopping. So they literally like fell down, they got like thinner, they got closer to the face, just everything goes downwards and looks depressed. Like this hair suddenly became very, very sad. So we're going to just make these more visible by using an inking tool. Make a lot of side strands, thinner strands. Everything is going down. Like everything looks so, so sad and uncomfortable. Just try to make no strand go like up, unless it's like really, really weird hair. But usually when the hair is wet, it just flops downwards. And of course, don't forget to use little droplets, like little U shapes on the tip of each of these pointy strands. Put some U shapes all across the hair and all across the face. You can use one long droplet, like almost a tear, like one of those moments when people go and say like, nobody can hear me, nobody can see that I'm crying in the rain because of all the rain droplets on my face. I don't know why I remember that, but still, it's something that can help you like memorize some of these tricks. Anyways, so the shading of this hair is similar. You always go to the lower part of each strand and just fill that in with a shading color. You can also just shade the entire lower area, but since this hair is kind of because this hair is wet, the shaded areas are pointier, thinner. Just the shadows of each strand are pointier and thinner. just as the shape of each strand is. Okay, let's go and do the boys here. So as we just learned, make sure to have everything pointing downwards and getting stickier, just getting closer to your character's face and body. Okay, so the last example here is, we'll just use the same shape that we previously had, then divide it into side strands, make it thinner. Everything is going like stickier to the face, everything is going down. This in particular will be definitely less pointing upward. It's going to go really down. Everything is just flat. Everything is so not as it used to be. So we have these that are going upwards, and then they are going to go more on the lower side. And don't forget this part of the hairstyle. Now we have a more calmed down version of the hairstyle. Of course, now we're going to draw out all of the thin strands with their thin counterparts and sad little dropped pieces. And of course, don't forget, don't put the hair any closer than the original halo around, because if you stick your character's hair straight to this line of his bare head, this will be a disaster because your character will look extremely sick and something will be definitely not that good. It will look really off. So pay attention to this. You always need to have some space between your bare head and your hair shape. And of course, let's not forget to use a droplet at the edge of each of these strands and little droplets on the neck, on the face, on the area of the hair, etc. With this. So we can use the exact same pattern of shading as we previously had when we just choose this lower part and completely shade it, but we also should add up some really pointy edges to just imitate the structure of the hair. And of course, using the thin little long lines on each of the hair strands. And there we go. If you guys have a suggestion on what you would like to learn next, please leave a comment down below and I'll be seeing you guys next time. If you want to learn how to draw complex wet clothes, the full lesson is included in my latest pack on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you would like to learn how to draw manga, please check out my book Manga Crash Course, available in 4 different languages, as well as my latest book Manga Crash Course Fantasy.